In this video, we're going to look at how to use while loops in JavaScript. While loops are used to repeat instructions in code while something is true. So they have two parts, a condition that is tested, and then a block of code that will run if that condition is true. Unlike if statements, which only run the code once if the condition evaluates to true, while loops will keep repeating the code while that condition keeps evaluating to true. So they're very useful for repeating instructions over and over again. So we're going to look at a couple of examples in this video. The first example that we're going to look at is just to start off with a number, and we'll make that number increase by 1 and count up by 1 each time a loop runs, a while loop runs, and we'll display that number on the screen. So for example, we'll start at 1. And we're going to make the program count from 1 to 10, and each time it counts, it's going to display that number on the screen. All right, and then in the second example, we'll look at making a number guesser, where we'll generate a random number, and we'll ask the user to guess what the number is, without knowing what the number is. And rather than asking them just once, we'll keep asking them over and over again until they get the number right. So every time they guess the wrong number, they'll be asked again. Okay, so let's start off with, we'll create a variable, and I'm going to create a counter variable. So I'll just call it counter, and I'm going to set it to 1. And what I want to do is make this number keep counting up. So I'll make this variable count up by 1 until we reach 10. So what I'll do is I'll create a while loop. So we just say while, and then in parentheses we specify the condition that needs to be true for this loop to run. And the condition needs to stay true for the loop to keep repeating. And once the condition is false, the loop will end and the code in that loop will stop running. So I'm going to check while the counter is less than or equal to 10. So as long as the counter is less than or equal to 10, this loop will keep running. So in the curly brackets, I specify the code that I want in the loop. So what I'll do is just display the number or the counter. Okay, and then every time this loop runs, I'll then increase the counter by 1. So I could say counter equals counter plus 1, just like that. Or I can shorten that to just counter plus plus, like that. All right, so just to have a look at this again before we test the code, this is the syntax or the rules, how we construct a while loop. Firstly, we say while. In the parentheses, we specify a condition we want to test. And as long as that condition is true, or evaluates to true, this code here will keep repeating over and over again. All right, so it'll display the counter, then it'll increase the counter by 1 and check, is the counter still less than or equal to 10? If so, repeat this code and keep running that code over and over again until eventually the counter is no longer less than or equal to 10 and this condition is false. That's when the loop will end and the rest of the code in the program will run. So just to see that, I might just say goodbye at the end of the program, and we'll see that this line of code won't run until this loop breaks or stops repeating. Okay, so let's go over to this page in our browser, right click and the page and click on inspect to bring up the developer tools, and then click on console. I'm going to refresh the page, and there we can see that the instructions in the loop have repeated 10 times because it's displayed the numbers 1 to 10, and then it displayed goodbye. Okay, so these two lines of code displaying the counter and then increasing the counter by 1 have repeated over and over again while this condition has remained true. And then once the counter got to above 10, the loop stops and it no longer displays those numbers. Okay, if I was to change that counter and maybe make this 5 instead of 10, then we'll see that the loop only repeats and displays those numbers 5 times. Okay, one thing that you need to be very careful of is to ensure that there is some way for the loop to exit or to stop running. All right. So if I didn't increase the counter every time this loop runs, if I deleted that line of code, what will happen is the counter will stay at 1, so it's initially 1, and if it never increases, then it will always be 1, which means that this condition here will always evaluate for true forever. And that's what's called an infinite loop. And if you have an infinite loop, it will actually break the program and can cause it to crash because it's doing something that it's going to keep doing forever and won't be able to stop doing. All right, so if I was to delete that line of code that increments the counter and refresh the page, I can see there's actually a counter here that shows how many times this number 1 has been displayed on the screen. And it's done it already a few thousand times, but eventually it'll get to a point where the page crashes. If I click on stop, my browser is already frozen up there. I can't do anything. The console is still doing something, but the page is pretty stuck. It's pretty frozen. So all I can do now is quit Chrome and reopen it and fix up that line of code. So I'm going to have to add that line of code back to make sure that there's some way for this condition to eventually become false. The counter is eventually going to become more than 10, and the loop will end, and the rest of the code will continue running. All right, I'm just going to have to quit Chrome and reopen that. In fact, I might have to force quit. It's completely crashed. All right, now let's have a look at another example. So in this example, we're going to ask the user to guess a number, and while that number is not the correct number, it's going to be a number between 1 and 10. If they don't get the number correct, then we'll ask them to keep trying. So I'm going to create a variable called secret number, and I'm actually going to use a function to generate a random number when this program runs. So math.random. Okay, so what this will do here is it's going to generate a random number between 1 and 10. Okay, and it's going to store that in the variable called secret number. Then what I want to do is ask the user to guess a number. So to test this out, we'll use a function called the prompt function, sorry. So we'll create a variable called attempt, which is going to store the user's attempt. And we'll say prompt, enter a number. Okay. Then what we'll do is check if the user has entered the right number, if they've got the number correct. So what we can do is create a loop, and we'll say while secret or while attempt is not equal to secret number, we'll ask them to enter it again. Okay, so we can just take this variable which already exists. We don't need to say var again because we've already declared this variable, but we can ask for the attempt again. We could say incorrect, try again. All right, and it will ask the user to enter a number in again. And as soon as the attempt is correct, as soon as the attempt is equal to the secret number, then the loop will end, and maybe we can display a message down here. You got it. Okay, so basically what's happening is we're generating a random number here between 1 and 10 and storing it in the variable secret number. Then we're asking the user to enter their attempt to try and guess the number. All right, might need to specify between 1 and 10, otherwise they might be guessing for a very long time. Then we're going to check while the attempt is not equal to the secret number. As long as this condition evaluates to true, it's going to keep asking for the number again. It's going to say incorrect, try again, over and over again if the user keeps entering the incorrect number, until eventually they enter the correct number. This condition will then be false, and it will exit the loop and run this line of code. So let's go and try that out. All right, so it's generated a number between 1 and 10, so we'll try 1. Incorrect, try again, we'll try 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there we go. You got it. So the random number that was generated must have been the number 7. Okay, and so that's how to use a while loop that can keep executing an instruction or a block of code, keep repeating that block of code while a condition is true. In the next video, we're going to look at something called a do-while loop, and then after that, we're going to look at a different type of loop altogether that's called a for loop. And then we'll be working through a few different examples to see how loops can be useful, very useful in our programs. That's it for this video though. Thanks for watching.